I see a message, New York Times travel interview request. And it had sat in my spam box for over a month. I met him and changed the way he thought about points. He was able to visit his girlfriend in Brazil when he wasn't going to be able to for months. Later, he wrote an article that was just like, the Points Guy is the site that every traveler needs. And it was digital, which at first my parents were like, oh, you weren't in print. But it was the biggest gift in the world because it was a hyperlink to the Points Guy, which skyrocketed my readership. I made $1 million within the first 6 months.
I'm Sammi Cohen, and this is Social Currency, a podcast that unpacks the stories that are shaping business, culture, and the intersection of the two. My guest today is Brian Kelly, aka the Points Guy. Before any vacation, I always look to Brian's advice on the Points Guy platform for their latest tips and tricks on how to optimize my credit card points for travel. Brian Kelly is an exception and not a rule in so many ways. He makes money through an affiliate model. He scaled a multi-platform media company. He found a way to turn a skill into a company, and none of these things are easy. Businesses within the information industry have a 1-year failure rate of over 27% and a 15-year failure rate of over 82%, which is the highest failure rate of any industry. But Brian has surpassed the 15-year mark, and his business is stronger than ever. And today, he's going to tell us why. Brian talks about the early days of the Points Guy, his strategy when it comes to partnerships and monetizing media, and what he's learned about scaling his reach and team that will help any founder in the growth phase. Plus, he gives incredible advice if you're someone who wants to know the latest tips on maximizing your points, but you also don't want to spend a million hours to do all of the research. This is Brian Kelly's Social Currency. Brian, welcome to Social Currency.
Thanks for having me.
There are so many different elements that I want to get into for the Points Guy, both as a platform and behind the scenes of how you built the company. So for whoever is living under a rock, can you give us a high-level overview on what the Points Guy is?
So simply put, thepointsguy.com is a travel website where we educate people on how to get the most out of their airline miles, credit card points, hotel points. And we also just cover everything travel. We've got a huge staff of really smart writers that cover everything in the industry. And then from there, we've got social media, YouTube channel, and our newsletters. Our newsletters are read by millions of people and have super high engagement of 60% open rate on our daily newsletter. So we are a go-to source for everything travel, but really with the focus on points.
That is insane. Your specific open rate? That's crazy.
I know. Obviously, we keep a really clean list. And once someone signs on to join our list, because you're getting free information every day, the top promotions, because it's a lot to take in these days. There are so many credit cards. We are living in a points world, and I like to tell people, especially in the US, this is the global epicenter for points and credit cards and loyalty and the ability. You can get thousands of dollars in value from a simple credit card sign up. And that's why I personally love this points world. There's a notion that it's just for the rich or the 1%, and that couldn't be further from the truth. You know how to responsibly use credit. Those in this points game actually have higher credit scores. So you can be playing this points game, traveling for free, exploring the world, seeing family, living a richer life while avoiding interest because you're paying your bills on time. And at the same time, because you're good with your credit score goes up and you get a cheaper mortgage rate. So to me, winning at travel is winning at life.
And I'm curious to hear about how you started the Points Guy, because the Points Guy to me seems like, of course, it's a brilliant idea, but in hindsight, there was no competitor at the time who was teaching you how to maximize your points. So how did you even come up with the idea?
So that's a myth, actually. So I started the Points Guy in 2010, and there were several other very prolific points bloggers that had been blogging since the early 2000s. So the quick story of my points journey is when I was 12 in 1995, my dad got a job for a startup, and I grew up outside of Philly. And it sucked because he would have to travel to Chatsworth, California every other week, basically. So and I'm one of 4 kids. So I remember it was tough. My dad would not be able to make a lot of basketball games, but, we knew he was doing it for us. But he came to me one day and he had all these freaking flyer miles. And I've always been extra, like from day one. Growing up in a beautiful little cul-de-sac in suburbia, I was like, I know this is nice and I'm so fortunate, but like, I want it all. I've had this internal drive to be successful, to travel the world. When I would play with the globe and spin it, I'm like, oh no, I really want to go to Tajikistan one day, you know, like where most kids are like, let's go to Disney, you know, like my stress dreams in middle school were like, what if I'm mediocre? You know, I just know this life is not for me. So my dad gets his startup. I'm like the computer hacker in our family. And he challenges me to book a trip using his miles. He's like, we'll go to Orlando, or if you want to go to Miami, just research it. And this is a tip I give for any parents out there. Challenge your children to at least start owning a specific portion of the trip. I swear the skills that I learned in 1996 planning our first trip to the Cayman Islands. Of course, I booked the Cayman Islands because I was like, I want to go somewhere fabulous. Enough of Florida. That's so basic. That was when I got into points. And I realized my dad's work trips, which, you know, were a buzzkill because we couldn't see him. But then all of a sudden, every year, our family of 6 would go to the Caribbean for completely free, basically. So that's when I started to understand. I had no idea that there was a world of people doing it. And then I went to college in 2001 and, 9/11 happened the first week of my freshman year. That caused a whole chain of, the travel industry crashed. All these low cost carriers came up out of nowhere. It was really interesting time. I went to the University of Pittsburgh and I could fly Pittsburgh to Philly for $30 each way. At the time, Southwest's program was 4 round trips. You get a free flight anywhere. So I would spend like $400 going home to see family on weekends. And then I could go to Phoenix or Las Vegas on these $500 tickets. So I was getting more than 100% back. So I started to maximize points myself. Then I got really into it, graduated college, worked in finance at Morgan Stanley, but I wasn't in finance. I was a college recruiter for the tech division. So I started in 2007. I think I'm going to make a ton of money working in HR because you have to remember 2007 in New York City was the Lindsay Lohan days of bottle service. I mean, all my banking associate friends were making $100,000 bonuses. It was a decadent time in New York. I get this job in recruiting. I wasn't making a ton of money, but I saw my pathway to VP. And so August of 2007, I joined. And of course, very shortly thereafter, the world imploded. So all of a sudden, right when Up in the Air came out, that was literally my life because I was traveling nonstop. I had all the elite status, but also being in HR. When all the reductions in force would happen, I would have to stand outside the conference room all day long and in a suit, escort people out because I worked in the HR division. So I was the Grim Reaper. So I would take on business projects to escape New York City so I wouldn't have to do the layoffs. So I was just living on a plane, raking in tons of miles. I think I was making $70,000 base salary. And I calculated one year I had $110,000 in just redemptions. So I was living a double life. It was cheaper with all my elite status to leave New York City and get a hotel suite, free breakfast, free food on the plane than it would be to spend a weekend in New York City where I had no cash. I was that person when my friends would go out to dinner and I would be panicked to split the bill. Wow. So I was living this points rich, cash poor portion of my life. It was truly a double life. So eventually, I just remember my boss every year would be like, you didn't get a bonus, but you're not laid off. So try again next year.
Thanks.
So in 2010, I started the Points Guy because there were other bloggers, but it was very much a hobby. They'd only post a couple times a week. And my friend said to me one day, like, you are a points expert. You're living the jet set corporate lifestyle. I have my corporate card. I figured out how to maximize that. He's like, you should start a blog. And actually, at first, the Points Guy wasn't even a blog. I was a travel agent. So I would charge people $50. And colleagues and their friends and family, I would basically just tell them how to book their trips. And then it was a couple months into it, a friend was like, he was so excited. He was an SEO expert. I didn't know what SEO was in 2010. Yeah. And he just begged me. He's like, please start a blog because it's the right time. The content is key. Everyone's confused about points. So June of 2010, I wrote my first blog post. And within like 6 months, it really started to take off.
What was the first deal that you landed?
The monetization in the beginning was really slow. Google AdSense at the time, I was making $50 a month, and I was doing my award booking business, which was very time consuming. So I was making like a couple $100 or $1,000 a month, but my life changed dramatically when a friend from college who worked at an affiliate marketing company messaged me and I thought he had a crush on me. So I rebuffed him for like a month or two. I was like, I'm not meeting you for drinks, And finally he basically was like, you're an idiot. I work for, at the time, it's called Linkshare, which is now Rakuten. Linkshare, he goes, I work for a credit card affiliate company. He's like, your site's not big enough to get approved, but like, I got you, girl. Like, he was like, I want to fast track you into an affiliate program. I think I can get you approved by either Chase or Amex. But I'm like, what does this mean? It sounds spammy, affiliate marketing. And he's like, no, you could get $300 per approval. And I remember thinking at the time I had 50,000 unique monthly readers and growing. So I was like, okay, so I don't need to even convert that many to make this lucrative. He's like, you don't even need to change your content. You're already writing about credit cards. Just use this link from our portal. And I remember the first day he like got me in. He's like, don't embarrass me. Don't do anything spammy, like just your normal content. And I was so naive. I just posted the whole URL. I didn't even hyperlink it. So I put up my first blog post and he calls me. He's like, are you trying to get me fired? Like, Brian, you don't paste the whole link, but after that, I made like $5,000 in a month just writing the same content. Another tip I always give to entrepreneurs, go through your spam inbox. So I went through my spam inbox one day and I see a message, New York Times travel interview request. And it had sat in my spam box for like over a month. And my heart starts racing as I open it. It was Seth Kugel, who was the frugal travel columnist at the time, which was a huge column at the New York Times that I read for years. And he basically was like, points are useless, prove me wrong. And I said, challenge accepted. We have to do this in person. I met him for like 3 hours at a Lower East Side bar and changed the way he thought about points. He was able to visit his girlfriend in Brazil when he wasn't going to be able to for months. So he booked a surprise ticket using the currency that he had sitting in front of him. And I saw the way his face lit up. He's like, wait, I can go next week to surprise my girlfriend. And he was like shaking. He's like, this is insane. I didn't have the money for this. So it was about a month later, he wrote an article that was just like, the Points Guy is the site that every traveler needs. And it was digital, which at first my parents were like, oh, you weren't in print. But it was the biggest gift in the world because it was a hyperlink to the Points Guy, which skyrocketed my readership. I made $1 million within the first 6 months of affiliate marketing once that New York Times article went up. So it was very clear to me from that point on, I need to leverage media. In traditional media, there were all the other bloggers in the miles and points space were very clinical. They're very intelligent people. They're way smarter at points than me, but they are not good communicators. They don't do press. So this whole miles and points world seemed to many people to be unknown because it really wasn't making the mainstream media because there wasn't a communicator that was in the mainstream media talking about the value of it. So I knew right then and there, April 2011, like I need to hone my press skills, my public speaking, start doing TV, which I almost fainted the first time I did CNN. But at each and every time I did it, I got better and better. And I was like, this will be my moat, building a brand and building excitement around something that otherwise could be very boring and clinical.
And that brand that you speak of is literally the reason why I had assumed that there were no other players in the space when you got started, because of course they may have existed, but very few, if any, have sustained and built the following that TPG has today. And I'm really curious to actually hear about the demographics, especially in the beginning of TPG when you started. So what were those diehard TPG
consultants? So any consultant or recovering consultant, I thank you because you are the reason. I mean, I still meet consultants because, really up until the pandemic, where Monday through Thursday travelers, hotels, loyalty, the Points Guy started to go kind of viral in that banking, consulting, road warrior. And I was one. So I worked at Morgan Stanley. I spoke the language. I was giving tips on what to say to call your Amex corporate card so you could link it to your membership rewards. So I was speaking a language. I think for the first time, a lot of consultants saw themselves in me as like an actual hardcore road warrior. New York City, I don't have a lot of time for, there's a lot of like weird things in the miles and points world, going out to Target, buying gift cards. I never had time for that because if you just maximize your credit card spending, your corporate spending, get small business credit cards, which is like very easy to do. I knew right that like my audience was busy young professionals that still had student loans and debt and couldn't spend 10 grand on the business class ticket to Europe, but wanted that lifestyle. Who doesn't want that lifestyle?
Yeah. And is that busy consultant-esque traveler still the primary demo today?
I wouldn't say it's the primary demo. Our primary demo is, it's funny because on the site, it skews a little bit more male, but on my Instagram, I'm 60% female followers, which is interesting. It is a much broader audience. Our top audience, New York and LA professionals. So, lawyers, small business owners, entrepreneurs, big in the tech world. It's like 10 million people a month of just basically very smart, educated travelers, which makes what I do so fun. I love meeting readers or, fans of the website. I have a lot of friends who are influencers that really there's a clash between their audience and they have to put up strong boundaries and whatnot. But meeting our fans, I always enjoy that. And just seeing their faces light up. And I also think it's made me a better business person because I am in my DMs. I understand the pulse and trends of if you listen to what your audience is saying, even the somewhat negative signals have helped me shape the business. Oh, are we getting a little too salesy? And when people come up to me, most of the time it's positive, but when people take the time to say something, I'll be at like a party and someone will pull me aside and give me feedback on the site. Sometimes that's annoying, but I always take it as a gift that someone is going to give me that intel that I'm sure many other people are thinking. So I think not just doubling down on traditional media and being a press spokesperson for this industry, but doubling down on social media too.
And I think one thing that really resonates with me is being in the DMs, because it really is almost like a free focus group that you have. They're the people who are reaching out to you, to your point, whether it's positive or negative, they care enough to reach out to you. They're not silent observers that have an opinion. They want you to hear the message. And so I think that's really something that will resonate with a lot of people listening. Anyone who's thinking about an idea for a company, or maybe you're in the early stages of launching your own business, be in the DMs with your customers or potential customers, because the feedback is really gold.
Totally.
And so we talked a lot about the early successes, but I'm curious if there were any early challenges that you faced as you were in the first year of growing TPG.
I left my job in corporate America 1 year from the day of my first blog post. So June of 2010 was my first blog post. The rest of that year was like all organic growth. I had a couple posts go viral and people started seeing me at cocktail parties in New York. And I remember the first time someone was like, "You're the points guy?" Because by the way, I will say so many people told me the points guy, you can't create a business. You'll never sell it. You'll never scale it because it's just you. So 15 years, we're now 15 years exactly to the beginning. And I can say unequivocally, that's not true. And it also has played to my advantage because I sold the company in 2012. It got bought again in 2017, but I'm still here, I think in large part because of the name of the company. It almost has given me job security in a way because I'll always be the points guy. So that's an interesting journey because so many people were like, that name is dumb. And it is true. Like people were like, it sounds like Sky, like the Points Sky, SKY. So sometimes I do have to say the Points Guy, like GUY. In the beginning, I would have to tell people, it's just staying it off your tongue, thepointsguy.com. People would just hear Sky. But the challenges were this, it started to become successful. Coming from Morgan Stanley, now all of a sudden I'm working with banks. I'm working with Chase and Amex. And I understood the inner workings of a mega bank, compliance, risk. Everyone's trying to cover their ass, right? So once people found out I was making a lot of money in affiliate, it was like the great gold rush of credit cards. I swear there were probably 100 new blogs that popped up. Every niche you could possibly think of, running for miles, so all about frequent flyer miles for marathoners. And everyone became a credit card affiliate. But I saw very quickly the greed that so many people were writing, cancel your credit card, open this. And I'm just looking at it like, you morons, you can't be a partner of a bank and then tell people to punch them in the face. And because banks spend a lot of money acquiring a customer. So consumer wants to cancel their card. And I'll always talk about why you'd want to cancel a card, but you can't be like, if you're going to get into bed with Amex and just be like, here's secret ways to cancel your Amex, steal the points. Because the banks are losing money on these acquisition. It's only after time. So basically I thought the industry was going to cut all affiliates off because of the misbehavior. And eventually there was this great culling that happened. And I survived because immediately I hired a compliance person first and foremost. So I went into every meeting with credit card companies. I'm going to be your voice in media, and I'm going to be a positive voice for credit cards and consumer loyalty at a time when they're so mainstream now. But when I started the Points Guy, the main media narrative was blackout dates, useless. These points, you can't use them to go anywhere, and you really have to be an expert, which was kind of true because most airline websites were horrible. You would go to any airline website, they'd only show their flights, maybe 1 or 2 partners out of 20. So most people in 2010 were going to websites thinking these points are useless. Unbeknownst to them, behind this wall, there was tons of really rich award data that all of a sudden I was starting to teach people how to use. But as people started realizing, holy, this is so valuable. In my book, I talk about 2010 to 2025. I call this like the platinum age of travel. Chase launched their Sapphire preferred card in 2016. The Reserve broke the internet. We were behind the scenes with Chase, helping that entire launch. So back to challenges, it was like standing out in a crowd of really poor business operators. And I was very hyper aware not to get looped in with the bloggers. And so many people in the blogosphere called me a sellout or whatever. I'm like, call it what you want, but I'm not going down on your ship. Like I had a very real sense of self-preservation because I'm like, I left my job in corporate America. This is my dream and I want to do what it takes. So I spent time going to the Amex Tower, to Chase headquarters. I would go down to Delaware. I would make an effort to build personal relationships, not just with the senior credit card people, but like the mid-level marketing managers. They were all excited to grow a new channel. This affiliate channel was way cheaper than taking out ads in the New York Times. So they could work with the points guy to get directly to the high-end, high credit, clients that they needed because we were coming out of the Great Recession. So everyone's focused on super prime, the exact audience that I was talking to. So realize it, but back to the whole point, if I'm doing all of these things, I can't also write. So I had to immediately hire actually Eric Rosen, who's still at the Points Guy. He was my ex-boyfriend's good friend from Princeton, an amazing writer. Another tip to people, like, never burn bridges with your exes because you never know when your next best employee might come from them.
I love that.
So yeah, it was scaling. And of course, a website called The Points Guy, having people write under that name and being comfortable with. But I knew early on, I just had to get really good writers who knew miles and points. But then we just started scaling and scaling. I mean, the growth, it was just, it still is like holding onto a rocket ship. It's been so fun.
I love the fact that you were comfortable very early on in bringing more people in. And as you spoke to earlier, I think there is perhaps a misconception with a name like The Points Guy that it's guy, not guys, right? Yeah. Can you talk me through what was going through your head when you realized that you needed to scale beyond yourself?
Yeah. Well, I mean, simply put, more blog posts equaled more money. Luckily for me, unluckily for my team at the time, I mean, I'm a fire hose of ideas. I have the brain that never stops. Like I have trouble sleeping at night sometimes because I'm thinking 20 steps ahead, which makes for like a challenging day to day, which I knew I had to have a day-to-day structured process manager, editor who could take ideas, but also assign them out. So I knew I needed people. I probably didn't hire enough people soon enough, because I was an HR associate. So I studied Spanish in college. I mean, I was student body president. I interned for big companies in business. So I always knew I wanted business, but I had no formal business education, no management experience. I had some program management and I was in the HR division. I understood recruiting and the need for good talent, but I was not a manager. I had no real practical management experience. So all of a sudden, I really am in a role of having to be a visionary, having to keep the clients and bring in new business, and then also grow the company. So it was definitely challenging, I think, throughout the years. I just wanted the brand to stand for something. Like when people talk about the Points Guy, I want to deliver. And I think I've never lost focus on delivering to the consumer. When you come to our site, I want to teach you how to go on your honeymoon. I want to teach you how to fly the best aircraft. I don't want you just looking at my social media and be like, oh, Brian flies Emirates and all these things. And almost all of my posts, I tie it back to, and here's how you do it too. I think probably could have hired more people and more experienced managers in the beginning because I tried doing it all, which eventually led me to burnout. In 2020, I completely stepped away from management. I realized at that point it was 150 employees and we had an office in London and a tech team in Austin and our parent companies in Charlotte. And I just was just constantly on the go and realized my true reason on earth is not to be a people manager. I'm more of a vision person. And that's the amazing thing about having sold the company in 2012 and then it got purchased in 2017, having a parent company that allowed me to shift my role. They were kind of like, we've been waiting for you to say this. You're great and the business is amazing, but I was, just completely burnout.
So what do you think caused the burnout when it happened in 2020?
So I think the beginning of the burnout, so when we were bought by Bankrate in 2012, which was a very hands-off purchaser. It was kind of a dream deal for me. I think I met with my boss every 6 weeks and they were just like, keep doing what you're doing over there at the TPG headquarters because we're doubling EBIT every year. We had like 12 employees and we're printing money. And then so they were just like, you guys do you, which was great in a lot of ways. But in a lot of ways, our business was we had no tech people. We also didn't have the resources we needed to really expand. So 2017, Red Ventures, amazing high performance marketing. behemoth kind of took over. And that was just like a complete culture shock because we went from, we had our French bulldogs in our office on Park Ave, very startup-y, very fly by the seat of our pants in a lot of ways, which worked, but we knew we had to grow up. So Red Ventures added a lot of operational structure to our life. So transitioning into this new, much higher paced corporate owner, which aligned with my personal values, but there was a lot of friction, heartburn, whatever. And just, even the silly things like we were on Gmail and had to transfer to Outlook. And there was this huge resistance and there was this fights and it was just a lot for me as the leader because I understood Red Ventures. Like, hey, we need to operationalize. You guys are doing free lunch. That's fine. But none of our other offices do that. Maybe can we just do it in a different way? Which makes sense. Most publishers did not have free lunch. Media and publishing was going down. We're still profitable. So it was hard for me to lead that transition while also at the same time, our business is booming. So more than ever, I'm in front of the camera, in press, being the head spokesperson, but also behind the camera and building the team and staffing. And then also because our new parent company has such structured HR processes. Talent reviews every other month,
Wow.
There's no way to slice this to be a CEO in the way that I had always been and be a part of this new, much more mature company structure. And I did it until 2020. We were expanding globally, but I could never be enough places at once. And I really was not giving my employees the time that they needed. I still am, the visionary where I'm pushing, but I'm physically not here enough. Internally, we had a leadership consultant who came in and we started to it was like therapy for work. She got feedback from all my employees, some of it, which was very blunt and oh, wait a minute, this isn't sustainable for everyone, and luckily in talking to, Red Ventures, hey, why don't I switch my role? They're like, amazing. We've got tons of people I can manage, but what you do is really special. So let's take out the things like going on the Today Show and speaking to 1,000 people at a conference and getting people excited, do that, so getting a leadership person, someone internal who can come in and solicit feedback from your team that they may not feel comfortable telling you, it will hurt, but it'll be the best thing that happens to you.
Wow. I'm really glad that you were able to have that realization of, okay, I've been going full 120% running this company up to this point. And at a certain stage, it's a natural transition to really do the things that can be scaled without you while you maintain the face of the sky.
And I'll also just add, I had never been to personal therapy. So at the same time, I had a personal therapist that just helped me start to think about, I wanted to be a parent. So having a business coach and a really amazing therapist, take a breather, get off the nonstop. You get addicted. I know I was addicted to just the nonstopness of it all. Years were just flying by, but I knew I was getting off track in terms of what I personally wanted, my personal health, my goal of being a dad. And then the pandemic hit at the same time this was happening. And I was like, let me just rethink what my role at this company is. And they fully supported that. Now I'm in a strategy. I'm our head spokesperson. I'm working with the team. I'm our biggest cheerleader, helping create new products that solve the issues that face a lot of our readers, but not in that day-to-day talent management role.
How did the pandemic shift the Point Sky business? Because obviously 2020 through really 2022, it probably didn't work or make sense for you to talk about how to use your points for travel. So can you talk me through what the strategy was around the pandemic time period?
It was a really tough time. So first, simply put, the Point Sky had been profitable since I started it. I never took $1 of investment money. Sold it for a good amount in 2012, and it's just, growth through the roof. So the 2020 was the first year we actually lost money in a month, which was wild to see because early pandemic, the credit card companies were like, whoa, are we going? I remember the headlines, depression, ? Everyone was batten down the hatches. We still made money in 2020 when it came back pretty quickly. And then even people who were at home were like, well, I'm spending all this money online. That's the thing about points and credit cards. Even in a recession, most of the credit card companies also made it much easier to use your points. Chase allowed you to redeem for Apple products and home products. And all the loyalty programs were like, okay, even if you don't want to travel now, here's all these other ways to keep engaged in these programs. So I think we evolved with it. It was just drawing a line of what everyone's comfortable with. We want to educate our users to make the right decision. Many people traveled in 2020 to see family members that were dying or whatever. So it's not up to us to just say, hey, we're going to just stop talking about travel in 2020 and let's pick it back up. We always felt travel is something that is, critical to so many people's lives. So let's at least educate people when they're ready how to do it themselves.
And you've brought up working with different credit card companies. Obviously, that's what the Points Guy is all about. But one thing that I'm really curious to hear, there's a lot of nuance because you're working with these credit card companies, which in many ways, for a lot of their cards, are competing directly against each other. So how do you really navigate those conversations with the credit card companies?
Yeah. So very early on, some big credit card companies wanted to kind of get in bed more with us and give us some more money up front. But I immediately always turned that down because if we became just too heavy on one issue where it's so visible, and there is no one right best fit, because when it comes to credit cards, there's three main things to assess: how you earn points, so where you spend your money, how you redeem them, how you want to spend them, and then the perks that come along with it. So all of these different categories can overlap in certain ways. Everyone spends a different amount of money. So there is no one best credit card. So we've always been like, we have to talk about all credit cards, whether they pay us a lot or little. Like, credibility is number one. And we'll never talk about a credit card that's bad for consumers. There's certain like fake credit cards out there. You'll never see them on our site, like that are just clear plays to cheat off of another credit card's branding, for example. I can't stress enough to, if you're in the business of consumer credibility, if you've got competition, like, once again, I think that the self-preservation factor is big, because in an instant, you will be called out for improper practices. Some of the smaller blogs can say more. There's a lot of nuance to these credit cards and gray area on getting applications and deals. You're not going to find these kind of gray area things on our site. That's not what our brand stands for. Our brand promise to our consumers is we're going to write about the products that make you smarter, help you travel easier. Applying for them through our site, our site's free.
Yeah.
So like, if you want us to be able to hire more experts that make your life better, then just apply through us instead of going directly through a bank. Readers who get a lot of value from our site know that and gladly, use our links to support the business.
It's clear that from the beginning, you've had this really long-term vision of what the Points Guy should ultimately be. And I think that there's this strategic element of knowing that you are building a brand that is based in credibility. So you are not going to sell out. You are not going to take the highest check from a potential partner if it doesn't feel right for the customer. And it's very tempting to take money. But I think ultimately it's very clear that your best interest is making sure that the customer is happy so that they stay engaged with the Points Guy too.
And Chase launching the Sapphire Reserve card in 2016 was the most exciting credit card launch in history. I don't care what you say about any other card. The excitement around that, triple points for the first time on travel and dining. And we worked with Chase behind the scenes on that. And part of that in building a currency of credibility is like, part of that deal I negotiated was we're going to be the ones to officially launch it. So there's all this chatter in the blogosphere. And Chase agreed. In a tweet, Chase confirmed it's true, it's coming. And then they shared the Points Guy article, official first details of the Sapphire Reserve, which went like super viral. And it was an exciting moment. So that's how I view partnerships with brands. It has to be exciting. And at the end of the day, a lot of blogs got a lot of the content wrong, which they would because they were conjecturing. But like, to be the Points Guy on the most exciting credit card launch in history, to be the first website to confirm all the details was amazing. And our readers were so excited. And then not only we launched that card, but we had a whole campaign of content, how to use this card to go on your honeymoon to Bali. Yeah. So it's not like, hey, just get this credit card offer. We're always doing the research on how to get the most value. But because we have good relationships with the Chase card team, that the 3X on travel actually included subways, parking, tolls. So we're going through the fine print to unearth that. And for people, if you live in New York and pay parking, it's expensive, but you get triple points on your Chase card. That's a win-win for everyone. Because when people can visualize this credit card and, oh, this is going to make my life better. I'm going to get free breakfast at hotels just by booking through,
Yeah.
So that's a fun part about marketing, is always thinking about the consumer angle.
And the Points Guy today is a household name. Literally, I could ask 10 people on the street if they've heard of the Points Guy, and chances are 9 of them at least would know what I'm talking about. It's no longer just a blog. The Points Guy is this multi-channel behemoth platform. So I'd love to hear your perspective on how you thought about going multi-channel and what it really means for the Points Guy to be on all of these different platforms.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a matter of meeting your consumer where they are. I look at my nieces and nephews. I'm 42 years old, and the way they consume content is wildly different. And it's also just good business because, while Google has been so nice to us SEO-wise over the years, our strategy of getting mainstream press links to the site, continues to confirm our credibility in the Google algorithm. But certainly there are times when the Google algorithm doesn't favor us and our site's too big versus younger, nimble. But you can't just have your whole business based on a Google liking you. Like you have to build newsletters. And I always just look at myself. I ask, how are you getting your information? Newsletters, we've been doing newsletters for years, and that's one of our biggest growth channels. Just there's so much noise now. Like, how can we trim that noise in a easy to read, digestible way for busy people? So yeah, I think it's just a matter of, we're in the business of helping people travel better and creating good content. So it's good business sense to diversify, but also being sure to not use the same metrics on every channel. Because sometimes it can be, why are we doing this again? It can be hard in a world of everyone wants ROI on every post, on every minute of time I'm using. Is this actually driving sales? Or our parent company realizes having a brand that is beloved is such a valuable asset in itself. So doing things that don't have clear ROI on paper, but add credibility to the brand. We do on YouTube. Our team in the UK is great at these 4-cabin reviews where they will fly the same airline in first, business, premium, economy, and economy. And it's a review in real time of the same flight in 4 different experiences. And like, people love these reviews. Are people applying for a credit card at the end of the review? No. And a lot of our audience there is international, which is great. It's good for our brand. People love it. So I think just also making sure you don't cut your business back to just what you think is like immediate ROI, having channels that may not be the best performing, but give life to the brand, I think is important.
Shifting gears a little bit to Brian as a business leader, as someone who's been now building TPG for what, 15 years. I'm curious to hear if you have any unconventional leadership philosophies.
I don't know if it's unconventional, but I have found that traveling with my employees, it has been the number one thing that has kind of broken through and built trust. So at the Point Sky, we do a lot of different charity initiatives. One of them is called Peace Jam, where we work with Nobel Peace Prize winners, and we have youth empowerment conferences all over the world. That's been some of my favorite moments at the company. We sponsor Peace Jam in Guatemala, Ghana, South Africa, and Liberia. And the trips that people go on, it's like the ultimate bonding. So I think while people are coming more back into the office, like thinking about taking your team and doing work that is in line with your business's core mission has been one of the biggest highlights of my career. It's getting to do that with our employees and having those experiences.
I love that. And I did not expect to hear that traveling with employees was a highlight, but it makes sense, especially given the mission-driven work that your team is doing. It's really great.
We also have fun too. So the peace conferences, we do like workshops on entrepreneurship, but then at night I'll take the team out and we'll go out to dinner in Accra. And, we just have these moments like people who are like, I started working at the Point Sky to help write about content. Now I'm in Accra at a cool reggae bar, with colleagues. And I think those trips have such a lasting impact on people and it helps them become better employees. So, for a lot of small businesses, make sure you're using your credit cards, use the points from your business spend. Anyone out there, if your business does Facebook, Bing, any online advertising, you can be earning. That's the number one way I earn points is, Amex Business Gold is 4 points per dollar on internet advertising, social media advertising. Chasing is 3x. So I have multiple cards and we use the points that the business uses for business spend to take employees on trips.
Wow. That's a great tip because I had no idea about the Amex. It's the Amex.
Amex Business Gold is 4x on internet advertising and a bunch of other categories.
Wow.
And same with Chasing Preferred 3x. So no, a lot of small businesses are spending on Facebook ads or whatever. You can be banking tons and tons of points.
That's good to know. I just learned something. That's great.
Yep.
Last 3 questions. These are questions that I ask every guest. So for the first one, are there any systems that you have in place that benefit your career or business?
I would say for me, because I work on weekends, I work on holidays, and I make sure to block out time and not feel guilty about it. That is something that I've had to, as someone who works a lot, is block out time, especially now that I'm a dad. So I've got a 2.5-year-old and a 4-month-old at home. And there are certain times now that I like blocking your calendar and not feeling guilty about it. I firmly believe not enough people do this, where our calendars are open and people are taking time all the time, but we don't put enough barriers around it. Or you have this thought in your head, like, I'm going to be seen as a low performer Of course, there's obviously balance to this, right? You don't want to be blocking your whole calendar, but having energy, because my burnout was real. I almost walked away from the points guy. That was after 10 years. I was like, this has been a good run, because I was just everywhere but nowhere. I had a beautiful house in the Hamptons that I never went to because I was just constantly traveling. So figuring out what the balance is. And a lot of times you just need to tell people what those boundaries are. People are not going to automatically assume what you need. And I see a lot of leaders get frustrated and burn out when you could avoid that by stopping and listening and figuring out what your boundaries are. For me, my burnout happened at COVID, which could not have come at, frankly, a better time, where I stopped traveling for several months. I started riding horses, working out more, getting my mind right, which helped me realize, oh, I actually need these things. And I'm going to take time for the hobbies that I love and not just cancel. So I think being more aware of what you need mental health wise. The hustle culture is insane. It still pervades our society as much as we think that like we're over hustle factor, but no. And in the entrepreneurship world, I invest in a lot of startups. It's nonstop all day. So I think you become too resentful if you burn out, especially if you have kids, which I'm now realizing. And even just looking at my calendar today of where I need to be, and then just asking the question where I absolutely have to be. And unlearning, because I'm a yes person and I want to do all of these things independently. When I looked at it, I had 3 different weekends back to back where I'm going to be without my kids. And I know at the end of that, I'm going to feel really guilty and not happy. So how do I say no? Maybe that's it. Also just saying no to things that don't critically matter.
My next question comes from the Social Currency Corner, where I get your input on a trend or story that's impacting business and culture. So this one's a juicy one. Last year, the Department of Transportation put new federal rules into effect that require all airlines that were flying to, from, or within the U.S. to provide passengers with automatic refunds if their flights are canceled or significantly changed. So can you share how this ruling will impact the travel industry more broadly?
This is an amazing ruling. Kudos to former Secretary Buttigieg. So basically what would happen, and the airlines were so naughty. So you're stuck, Delta has a meltdown like they did last summer, and you're stranded. And you spend $4,000 for your whole family to fly to Cancun. Your money's locked up in those tickets. At that point, Delta, they didn't have to give you a refund. A lot of times they would say, oh, well, we can fly you standby for 4 days as you wait in the airport, and people couldn't just cancel, get their money back, or know that they would get their money back. So you were stuck at the airport. And most middle-class families who just can't just buy new tickets and not know that they're going to get refunded. So the DOT rule is a great first step at saying, hey, look, if your airline's playing games with you, you have the ultimate opt-out button. So if my flight's delayed 3 hours or more, if you're at the airport, you're like, I'm not going today. Like if it's a tornadoing out and you're delayed 3 hours and you want to call it a day, you have the ultimate right to just be like, respectfully, give me my money back. I'm out. Or, in the frequent flyer mile world, what I love teaching people is your points. It's not just for vacations, but whenever I'm at an airport and my flight's delayed, I instantly use points to book a backup option on another carrier. Because what people don't realize is during the pandemic, all the airlines, they've since made it much more difficult to get cash refunds, but using your frequent flyer miles, all the major US airlines, you can book a flight and cancel it up until departure for free and get all your miles back. Think about that. Miles and points are like an insurance policy. If you're flying one airline and they're playing games with you and you've got to get to that wedding in Charlotte, you can just book on a different carrier that leaves 2 hours later, 3 hours later as a backup. So you've got your backup. If your original flight goes out, just cancel online and get your miles back. So that DOT rule is a great first step. Now, the next step to that, people will be like, well, when airlines play games and I miss my cruise. And I do think the airlines do some criminal things out there, like selling connections that are 45 minutes at Atlanta Hartsfield Airport. Even on a good day, you're going to be stressed, So I teach people to not set yourself up for failure. These days, 2-hour minimum connections in the US, 3 hours abroad. Like your time's not that valuable. Like when you think about the day of vacation you're going to miss because you didn't want to spend 48 more minutes at a gate, read a book, like figure something out, listen to an audiobook, build in more time. Like we're all busy people, but then we do these stupid things that destroy the first day or two of a trip. But I do think we need a passenger bill of rights like you have in Europe. So when you're flying out of Europe, if you're flying Paris to New York on Delta, if they're delayed or canceled, they owe you cash compensation for that. And that's what a lot of Americans don't realize. Also, as a tip, When you're flying from the US to Europe, I always fly on a European carrier because when flying to Europe, even on a European carrier leaving the US, you're entitled to the EU laws. So if all things are considered, Air France versus Delta, choose the Air France flight. A, it's better in flight, usually, better food, service. And I'm not just singling Delta out here. I do love Delta. That's just like a good example. I like because Air France is better than Delta, I think, internationally. But you also get protections if it's delayed or canceled. And most people don't realize that. So until our Congress passes a passenger bill of rights that outlines the compensation you're owed, you're pretty much at most entitled to a refund. Now, it doesn't hurt to ask. I always ask for compensation. My in-flight entertainment here to LA was broken. So AA gave me 5,000 miles, which it's like $100, but it took me 2 minutes to write. So always write and ask for compensation, keep it short and sweet, but your credit cards, I cannot stress this enough. So not only, the points are really valuable, earning and redeeming, but the perks. And a lot of credit cards, especially the premium ones, if you're delayed 6 hours, you might get $1,000 per ticket to get a hotel, Ubers, food. Don't take the $8 voucher they might give you at the airport, but your credit card perks are where it's at. Your credit cards will cover you. So that's why, in addition to the points, the perks and protections you get from using credit cards are critical.
Ooh, there were so many good gems in there. I am really excited because, to be honest, every single point that you just brought up, I was not aware of. So I am seriously taking notes on my side. Let's end with some advice. So for this part, I asked my listeners to submit questions, and here was one of my favorites because this definitely applies to me. What is your single best piece of advice for someone who wants to maximize their travel rewards without making it a full-time job or even part-time job to do it?
So get a credit card that has transferable points. There's 4 main cards out there or programs. So this is American Express membership rewards. There for points, the Amex Gold Card's a no-brainer because you get 4 points per dollar on dining and groceries. We all spend in those categories. People are always shocked that the Platinum card actually has worse points earning than the Gold card, and the Gold card's much cheaper. So I love an Amex Gold card. Chase Sapphire, triple points on travel and dining. You get a $300 credit every year, which brings the annual fee down, plus a ton of those perks, the travel interruption, and Capital One Venture X, and then the Bilt card. So if you pay rent, you should be paying on a Bilt card. It is no annual fee card, and there are no fees to pay your rent. I repeat, this is not like a 3% transaction if you pay with your Bilt card. It is a no-brainer. Full disclosure, I'm an investor in Bilt, but this has changed the game for so many renters. You can earn up to 100,000 points a year for free, and that could be $2,000-$3,000 in value just from doing what you pay. The beauty of these transferable points programs are you're not just putting it in one airline. They allow you to transfer to a ton of different carriers. So when you want to go to Dubai, you can transfer in most of these programs to Emirates. If you have just, say United credit card because you fly United, all of a sudden you want a honeymoon in the Maldives and fly Emirates, but you cannot. If you are banking your points into a single airline or hotel, you are losing value. Now, I'm not saying not get those cards because they do come with perks like elite status or whatever that might be valuable. But in general, get yourself an Amex Gold, a Chase Sapphire Reserve, Cap One Venture X, or Bilt card. Those are like the no-brainer cards, in my opinion, that have wide categories where you earn a lot. And then when it comes time to redeem, you have a lot of options. And I will end on, you don't have to be a points expert. Now, there are tools like point.me and seats.aero, A-E-R-O. These are 2 tools that I use almost every day because it's easy to earn points. But say you want to buy LA to Tahiti, which airline should you transfer to? Point.me is good if you know the exact dates and where you want to travel. It'll search. And if you have an Amex card, point.me/Amex, you can use that tool for free. It's also built into the Bilt app. Seats.aero is a game changer as well because whereas point.me looks at a lot of airline programs and then on a single date, and it'll tell you all the options you have, Seats.aero will look at one airline program at a time. So let's just say Emirates. You live in New York. You've always wanted to take their A380. They actually fly JFK to Milan. You want to take your summer trip in first class, take your shower on the plane. You want to, surprise your partner with, Dom Perignon, caviar, shower in this. It's an epic experience. You can look at Emirates for a year and sort by first class, and it'll show you all the dates that they have availability. So my main tip in getting the most value out of your points these days is be flexible and go on the hunt. Use these tools, find the best availability, and then plan your trip around it. That's how you can get the most value out of your miles and points without having to waste tons and tons of time manually searching day by day.
I am going to start doing that. Brian, thank you so much for stopping by and having this conversation. For everyone listening, you can find Brian and the Points Guy on socials. I'll link the handles in the show notes. And if you want to learn more about leveraging airline and credit card points and just more of these hacks, you should read his book, How to Win at Travel. I'm planning my honeymoon, as we talked about, so I'm going to be studying all of your advice so I can maximize my points. Brian, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Safe travels, everyone.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Social Currency. I've been wanting to launch this show for so long. I can't tell you how excited I am to do this and how thrilled I am that you're actually here listening. It means the world to me. If you liked what you heard today, please rate and review the podcast because it massively helps to support the work I do to bring the show to life. And if you want to keep up with the hottest business lore in real time, follow me on Instagram at Sammi Cohen Talks and subscribe to my newsletter, Social Currency, which is linked in the show notes. Social Currency is a production of Social Currency Media and Money News Network. The podcast is hosted and executive produced by me, Sammi Cohen. Social Currency is produced by the Money News Network team. See you next time.